I still remember the exact moment it clicked for me, because it wasn't hype, it wasn't a moon prediction, and it definitely wasn't a TikTok influencer screaming price targets. It was the realization that the game was rigged, the system was changing, and XRP was sitting right in the middle of it all, quietly waiting, while everyone else chased memes and noise. And that's when I decided I was going to get my first 1000 XRP, no matter how long it took or how boring the process felt, because sometimes the most powerful moves are the least exciting at the start. And if that sounds familiar, welcome back to the XRP Insider Network, where we decode the signals they don't want retail investors paying attention to, so make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what we're breaking down today is exactly how patience beats hype and why the first 1000 XRP is the hardest, but most important, milestone you'll ever reach. And just to be clear before we go any further, this is not financial advice. This is simply my experience and perspective. So take it as information, not instruction. When I first discovered XRP, I wasn't flush with cash. I wasn't an early crypto OG, and I wasn't throwing thousands of dollars at every dip. I was someone who had been burned before by chasing fast money, buying green candles, and selling red ones out of fear. And XRP forced me to unlearn all of that, because the price wasn't rewarding emotional behavior. It was punishing it, slowly and consistently, and at first that felt frustrating, almost suspicious, because you'd see Bitcoin rip, Ethereum pump, meme coins explode overnight, and XRP would just sit there, like it was waiting for something no one else was paying attention to. And that's exactly what drew me in. I didn't buy my first XRP because I thought it would 10 times in a week. I bought it because the deeper I went into the lawsuit, the payment rails, the banking integrations, and the global settlement layer narrative, the more it felt like XRP wasn't built for retail excitement. It was built for infrastructure, and infrastructure doesn't move until it's needed. And once I understood that, my strategy changed completely. My first purchase wasn't big. It was uncomfortable but manageable. And I remember looking at my balance and thinking, this doesn't feel like much. But I also realized something important. Every XRP I owned was one I wouldn't be scrambling to buy later if the narrative flipped overnight. And that mental shift is everything. Instead of asking how fast I could get rich, I asked how consistently I could accumulate without stressing my finances. And that's where the real progress started. I stopped watching the 5-minute charts. I stopped reacting to Twitter panic. And I started treating XRP like a long-term position, not a trade. And that meant buying during boredom, not excitement, because boredom is where positions are built. There were weeks when nothing happened, months when sentiment was dead, and headlines that made it sound like XRP was finished. And ironically, those were the periods where I added the most, because fear creates discounts, and silence creates opportunity. I didn't need a lump sum to reach 1000 XRP. I needed discipline. And that discipline came from setting a simple rule. If I could afford it without stress, I added a little more, and if I couldn't, I did nothing, because doing nothing is still a strategy when it's intentional. The first 100 XRP felt slow. The first 250 felt slightly better. But somewhere between 400 and 600, something changed psychologically, because I stopped feeling like I was starting and started feeling like I was positioned, and that's when conviction replaces doubt. I wasn't immune to FUD. I saw the same headlines you did. I heard the same arguments about centralization, suppression, and missed cycles. But instead of reacting emotionally, I asked a different question. What happens if XRP actually succeeds at even a fraction of what it's designed to do? And what happens if I don't own enough when that moment arrives? That question mattered more than any price prediction, and it kept me consistent when others gave up. By the time I crossed 1000 XRP, it didn't feel euphoric. It felt calm, almost boring, and that's how I knew I did it the right way. because real positioning rarely feels exciting in the moment. It feels obvious in hindsight. And if this is resonating with you so far, make sure you tap that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you are on your XRP journey, because everyone's path starts differently, but the mindset shift is always the same. What really cemented my confidence wasn't a price move. It was watching how the conversation around XRP slowly evolved while the price stayed flat. Because behind the scenes, you could see the pieces lining up. Regulatory clarity inching forward, institutions speaking more openly, payment corridors expanding quietly. And none of that shows up on a candlestick chart until it's already too late. And that's the trap most people fall into, waiting for confirmation from price instead of positioning ahead of it. I realized that my first 1,000 XRP wasn't about profit, it was about optionality, about owning a seat at the table if the system actually transitions the way many believe it will. And that's a completely different mindset than chasing gains. There were moments where I questioned myself, especially when other assets were outperforming, and it felt like opportunity cost was eating away at me. But then I reminded myself that diversification includes time horizons, and XRP was my long-game asset, the one I didn't touch, didn't flip, and didn't panic sell. And ironically, that made it easier to hold because I wasn't expecting immediate validation. I also learned the importance of custody early on, moving my XRP off exchanges once my balance grew, understanding reserve requirements, and actually learning how the XRP ledger works, because ownership hits differently when you understand the technology behind it, and that knowledge creates patience. When I finally crossed that 1,000 XRP mark, I didn't announce it, I didn't screenshot it, and I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone, because the real value was internal. I had built a position through consistency, not luck, and that confidence spilled into every other investment decision I made after that. The truth is, most people will never reach their first 1,000 XRP, not because it's impossible, but because they quit too early, they get distracted, or they let short-term noise shake them out before the long-term thesis has time to play out. And that's exactly how wealth transfers from the impatient to the patient. If XRP fails, I accept that risk. But if it succeeds, I know I won't be standing on the sidelines wishing I had taken it seriously sooner. And that peace of mind alone is worth more than the price fluctuations along the way. As we move forward and the narrative continues to shift, I believe stories like this will become more common. People quietly building positions while the crowd argues. And then suddenly, everyone will want to know how they did it, even though the answer was simple the whole time: consistency, conviction, and patience. If you've made it this far, make sure you're subscribed, because this channel exists to cut through the noise and focus on what actually matters. And remember, this isn't about getting rich overnight. It's about not being late to a system-level change. And the first 1,000 XRP isn't the finish line, it's the foundation.